So let's create our first table. We're going to be creating an ingredients table. So you can see here, let's just run it, and then we'll talk about it. So you can just copy this, or we can even just type it out a little bit so you can actually kind of get a feel of what it feels like to type it. Create table, ingredients, and it's going to have a couple of things in here. So we're going to have an ID, which is going to be an integer, or you can put integer like this, or you can just put int, it's the same thing, or int4. I don't know why that would ever be the one that you would choose, but you can choose that. Int, it is a primary key. It's generated always as identity. Okay, then we're going to have a title. It's going to be a varchar, and we're going to give it a length of 255. It is unique and not null. Okay, then we're going to close our parentheses and we're going to hit a semicolon. So first of all, the way that we know that it successfully ran is you see here it says create table. It's going to repeat back to you what you just did to tell you this worked, right? And now if I hit \D, you can see here I have a table and a sequence, which is what I'm expecting. And if I say \D on ingredients, it'll actually describe the table to me, which is an integer, of ID, and a title. So all this works. Let's actually break it down piece by piece of what we actually just did. So create table, we're telling SQL we would like you to create a new table. You can think of a table as basically just a spreadsheet, right? It's got rows and it's got columns. The columns are all represented here like ID and title, right? It's going to have an ID for every single one of these, which is basically just a unique identifier, right? That's literally what it is. And then we're going to have a title, which is going to be something like cucumber or flower or chocolate or whatever you want to think of there, okay? We're naming the table ingredients, and then we're going to give it all of the various different columns, right? You can basically think of, like, again, setting all of the column names in your spreadsheet. You have to tell it what type of thing it is. We're telling it the type of thing, the data type here is integer, so this can only be a number. If I try and put, you know, Apple into the ID, it's going to say this is not an integer, you can't do that. So it actually is going to verify and make sure that that's true. We're going to say that this is the primary key. Every table that you're going to create is going to have some sort of primary key, right? It's going to say like, this is how I'm going to index this table, right? So in this case, we're just saying that the ID is the primary key. That's going to be very common. It's not always true. I'll show you one later in the course that's not. But for now, most of these are going to be IDs kind of like this. And then this generated always as identity. If you've done previous versions of Postgres, they used to call this serial, S-E-R-I-A-L, right? Not the food. They actually, I think you actually still can do it. I think it still works, but it's been, if it's not been deprecated, it's at least been de-emphasized. This is actually more compliant to the SQL spec. That's why this is preferred now, even though serial was a bit more simple, right? But here we're saying basically, we want you to always generate this key for me, and I want it to be incrementing, right? So the first thing I'm going to create is going to be ID 1. The second thing I create is going to be ID 2. If I delete that one and then I recreate it, the next thing we'll create will probably be ID 3, right? So it's going to give everything across your entire app a unique identifying key that we don't have to keep track of. That's what this ingredients ID seek, this thing right here, that's what this actually keeps track of right here, is it's the next thing in the sequence, right? The next number that's going to be put into that ID, okay? So that is the first column. The second column, we're saying that we're creating a title, right? The varchar is a type of string, right? So text, right? Free text. And we're saying that this has a max length of 255 characters, right? So if you have a ingredient that's 256 characters, it's going to truncate the end of it, and it's not going to store that last one. We could put another one here called text. So it would just be title, text, unique, not null, right? Text is infinite length, right? It's variable length. But titles in general, like the title of your ingredient's not going to be very long. This allows Postgres to kind of shrink that storage size a little bit, right? Keep it a bit smaller. And then the length is 255. That's a common one to pick just because that'll fit in some amount of bytes. I can't remember exactly how many, but it's pretty reasonable that we can expect the titles of our ingredients to be under 255 characters in length. And that is our first table. It's an empty table, but nonetheless, it is a table. So we've created our spreadsheet and we've put nothing into it, but we now have a place to put data. You're going to hear me a lot today use the spreadsheet analogy. It's because databases, well, basically a spreadsheet is a database. It's just a database that it's really easy to edit with Google Sheets or Excel, right? And it's not actually theoretical. You can actually use Google Sheets as a real database. You can write SQL queries that work against spreadsheets. So it's not theoretical, it's actually a true thing that you can do. I'm not going to recommend that you run your entire company on Google Sheets, though I've heard of people doing it. So we're going to talk about inserts more in the next chapter, but I want you to just copy and paste this bad boy with me, the insert into ingredients here. Mostly so that we can see what happened. So I inserted into ingredients, I inserted a bell pepper. So now if I say select star from ingredients, you can see there I have one thing in my database. I have a bell pepper. But notice here, nowhere did I specify the ID, right? The ID just came with it. This is what I was saying about this primary key generated always as identity. That's where that comes from, right? So it's going to just keep updating that. So you don't have to keep track of it. The database keeps track of it for you. And again, we'll talk about inserts in depth in the next chapter. I just wanted you to, as well as selects in the chapter after that. But I wanted you to see this is how stuff makes it into the table, and now we actually have something in our table. Yep, so they used to call it serial like that, but now the generated always identity is more compliant to the generic SQL one, and they're trying to be good citizens of the SQL world, so that's where generated always as always comes from. And so you should see something like that, which you saw. So I want to show you how to drop a table. So let's do that just for fun. Drop table ingredients. And now if I say \d, you'll notice that it did not find any relations. That's what drop table does. By the same token, you can say drop database, recipe guru. We could totally do that. Well, whatever, let's just do it. It's fun. Except you don't have to do this, but and then now we can drop database recipe guru, and lo and behold, it is gone. So create database recipe guru. A note on semicolons. A semicolon means the end of a statement. Just like in JavaScript where you put a semicolon at the end of a line to let JavaScript know period, full stop, end of sentence. It's the same thing in Postgres. It is required here though. There's no automatic comma insertion in Postgres. It's going to keep going until you give it a semicolon to let it know that I'm finished with this. So it does mean that you can put multiple statements on one line. Right? Multiple queries. I'm going to use those terms more or less interchangeably, statements and queries. The one thing that you notice here when I do this \c recipe guru, I'm not putting a semicolon there. It's because PSQL doesn't care, right? This is not SQL. This is PSQL helper things, right? So it doesn't care about semicolons, but your SQL does. That's why sometimes you'll see it and sometimes you won't.